All right, welcome to the Biscuits and SEC Week 11 preview. Also, we're going to do a little bit of Week 10 review. We always do that. I don't know why we just call it a preview show, but we do a little review as well. I'm here with the Hammer and Hank, to talk all about SEC football. How you doing, Hank?
Doing good. Thanks for having us as always. Happy to be here.
Oh yeah, a lot of good stuff to happen. There were some weird things that happened last weekend. There were some pretty good games, and there was some decent performances to look at. But we'll start off with kind of go in order of less important to most important from the last week, and that we'll start out with Georgia just absolutely steamrolling Missouri. Missouri kicking a field goal in the end just so they can cover. Had no purpose to deal with the game, but they did it. But Georgia just kind of ran the ball and did what they needed to do. And JT Daniels got some time.
Yeah, it was funny. That the Drinkwitz kicking that field goal to cover is not the first one who's done that. I think Stoops did something very similar on Georgia earlier. So anybody that tells you the coaches or players don't know what the line is, I think they're lying these days. But yeah, that was I think exactly what we expected to see in a sense as far as the score goes. The game played out a little differently. Missouri hung with them for about a quarter and was just totally selling out to stop the run. Everyone thought that they were going to get run all over. They didn't quite get run all over as bad as we were thinking, but Georgia hurt them in the passing game. And I honestly thought, having gone back and watched a little bit more of that game, it seemed to me pretty early on, once Kirby and the Georgia staff saw that Missouri was just totally selling out on the run, they decided to basically give Stetson and then ultimately JT a little bit of reps in the sense like, hey, we know we can win this game. Let's air it out. Let's throw the ball around a little bit more than we have been and see how it looks, see what we got. And, again, it was a glorified practice. They did fine. Stetson looked good. JT looked good other than the interception, a little bit rusty, I'm sure, as you can imagine. But just another easy win for Georgia.
Yeah, and we'll move on to Ole Miss, a 27-14 winner over Liberty. They were up 24-0. The game was over. I always tell people that was looking at the second half at 13 minutes and 13 seconds to go in the game that Ole Miss had scored more points than Liberty would through the whole game, so the game was over. But they're going to play hypotheticals and things about the way it finished. But all in all, it was a good win for Ole Miss. They just needed to get the W, get ready for A&M. Game days on campus. And we'll talk about that against Texas A&M a little bit once we get to the preview. But, I mean, like I said, a win's a win.
Yeah, nothing to be upset about, like you said. You look at the final score, and some people might scoff at it, but they covered, first of all. And second of all, yeah, it was 24-0. So I think given how beat up Ole Miss is and how many tough games they've had in a row, it's only natural to let off the gas a little bit when you're up 24-0 on a group of 5 team at home. So I think that's just what we saw. That they knew they were going to win that game, and they sort of just let their foot off the gas, which not a big deal. They played fine. Matt Corral had a good day throwing the ball. Defense played well. Multiple turnovers on Malik Willis. So just again, easy win, and yeah, don't let the box score or the final result fool you, because a lot of that was picked up in garbage time.
Yeah. Texas A&M, a 20-3 winner over Auburn. I don't think there was an offensive touchdown scored in this game. But A&M got the win. The defenses really kind of showed out. Bo Nix proved that he's a different quarterback away from home than at home. It's absolutely bizarre.
Yeah, that was the Bo Nix that, to his credit, we haven't really seen much of this year, but we've seen a lot of in his first 2 years. He did not look very comfortable, and he ended up throwing an interception later, but obviously it was the fumble that A&M took back to the house that was the backbreaker. I think once that happened, it was pretty clear that, barring some sort of crazy coverage bust or a miracle, that they weren't going to come back and win that game, because they couldn't move the ball all day. A&M stopped the run well and did a pretty good job of keeping Bo Nix in the pocket, which I think really frustrated him. He never had any rhythm with his receivers. And then obviously you turn the ball over twice in that kind of game. you're not going to win. So it was a good win for A&M. Obviously that defense is playing really well and is going to give them a chance in every game. Certainly there was some things offensively A&M could have done better, but at the end of the day, you get a win, you cover the spread, and move on.
Yeah, now we get to the good games and weird games of the weekend, I'll call it. Arkansas, a 31-28 winner over Mississippi State. 3 missed field goals for the Bulldogs. This kind of puts Mississippi State in a precarious position. They have a chance to be Birmingham Bowl bound at 6-6 to finish last. They still have Tennessee State left on their schedule, but they go to Jordan Hare, so it should be 5-5. And of course, they had the Egg Bowl at the end, which could go either direction. But it's a game that Arkansas was able to pull out. They did so kind of similarly to the way the Ole Miss game played out in the fourth quarter. It was a close game, a tight game going into the fourth quarter, and then all of a sudden both sides were going up and down the field scoring touchdowns. And that's kind of what happened against Ole Miss, except this time Arkansas was able to finish. They got the touchdown and the 2-point conversion and was able to pull out the victory.
Yeah, exactly. It did feel very similar to that game. I picked Mississippi State, so when that kid missed the field goal, I I was a little bit upset just for my pride. But at the end of the day, again, you give Arkansas credit. That's a team that started off the year really hot, went on a losing streak, and a lot of people, myself included, were kind of doubting that they could get back up off the mat and come out and win. And especially without Catalan in this game, they showed they could do it. They played well defensively. Will Rogers continues to play really good and give his team a chance, but ultimately, KJ Jefferson led Arkansas down on a 2-minute drive, scored a touchdown, got a 2-point conversion, and Mississippi State couldn't make a field goal all night. So it was, a good game. I feel bad for the Mississippi State kickers. I think 2 of them, got trotted out there, and the kid who missed the game winner hadn't kicked all night. That was his first attempt, and obviously Leach took it out on him in the press conference and said they were going to have open tryouts this week or whatever. But that's college kickers. We see that all over the country every single week. So nothing new there. Just a good win for Arkansas, and certainly a tough loss for Mississippi State, who, like you said, was hoping to get bowl eligible with a tough schedule remaining.
All right, Tennessee, a 45-42 winner at the Big Grocery Bag in Kentucky. They did so with 14 minutes of time of possession. I started keeping track of this in the third quarter and started putting like Tennessee, 8 minutes of time possession. They're winning by 10. And they were just every time Kentucky would get close, they'd pull out. And that last drive, I thought Kentucky, okay, this is where the dam is going to break. This is where all that possession is going to be meaningful. But no, they lost the game and had 46 minutes of time of possession. And Tennessee's just explosive, and I think Hendon Hooker right now might be SEC Offensive Player of the Year.
Yeah, he's got a really good case. I mean, it's pretty clear, not only just because the numbers he's putting up, but you look at what Tennessee was doing before he took over and after, and it's obvious the impact he's had on that team. Yeah, you look at the stat line and the box score, and it makes 0 sense. You said time of possession, total yardage, first downs, third down conversion efficiency, everything is slanted in Kentucky's favor pretty heavily. But it's just a matter of giving up explosive plays. I mean, that's the funny thing about football and Tennessee's offense especially is they're going to try to take chunk plays. And, obviously I'm sure Heupel might not want to have his defense out there for 46 minutes a game. But at the end of the day, you take points when you can get them. And if you can rip off big plays, then you take them. There's no need to change anything they're doing offensively. Tough loss for Kentucky. I was impressed with Levis. I thought he played a really good game after a couple bad weeks. We know they played better at home, and that atmosphere was great, but just didn't have quite enough in the end. And I know the Tennessee fans weren't happy about the face mask and the the unsportsmanlike that Stoops got as a result. But at the end of the day, if you can't stop a defense, if you can't stop Tennessee's offense when they only have the ball for 14 minutes, then you really have no one to blame but yourself. So,
yeah, there was one point at the end of the first quarter where Kentucky had the ball for like 14 minutes and 30 seconds. to 30 seconds for Tennessee, and the score was 14-14. And I was like, okay, there's just weirdness that's about to happen here.
Yeah, exactly. It was I would encourage anybody that didn't watch it live to go back and watch it because it is an incredibly entertaining game.
Yeah, absolutely. Alabama 20-14 victor over LSU. This is a game Alabama shouldn't have won, and if LSU had its pieces in place, they wouldn't have won it. LSU got stopped at Alabama 8, and they were in Alabama territory probably 2 or 3 times at the end of the game. If they'd have just kicked field goals on fourth down instead of going for it, there's more than enough there for them to win. But Alabama actually just lucked out of a win against LSU, and I don't know what to make of this. I think LSU is going to go into the tank now. This was kind of their death throes game. And I've been thinking online, it's like, hey, they play ULM next week in Tiger Stadium. ULM might get them.
It's possible. I'm on your side in this one. I think that was sort of the last ditch effort from LSU and this Ed Orgeron in particular. It seemed like obviously those guys were playing hard, and you give them a ton of credit because half of them are backups. All their good players are out, and like you said, if some of those guys are there, they win that game. Matter of fact, I think if one player in particular, Keisha Butte, is in the game, they will win because Max Johnson had a very bad game. He didn't look comfortable all night, was holding on to the ball, and just had really no rhythm with his receivers. So if he had his go-to guy, I think they probably would have scored at least 21, which is what they needed to win. But I think that was their last ditch effort. And they were throwing stuff almost at the wall. I mean, their defense, Durante Jones had a good plan. Give him credit because they were throwing fronts at Alabama that they had not shown anyone all season. And the blitzes they were bringing, they had not brought all season. So it was something that now is on film so teams can prepare for it, A. But, B, obviously it caught Alabama way off guard. Their offensive line looked like a mess. They somehow couldn't run the ball on LSU, who everyone's been able to run the ball against. So I really don't know what's going on in Alabama. They're very lucky to get out of there with a win, and lucky that they've got in New Mexico or New Mexico State this coming week, so they get a nice reprieve before Arkansas and Auburn to close out the year. Certainly, they could still run the table, and that's probably the most likely scenario, but they were incredibly lucky to get out of there with a win, like you said.
Yeah, absolutely. Then we go to the weirdest game of the season. South Carolina absolutely boat races Florida, just embarrass them. The starting quarterback for Florida, Anthony Richardson, hurts his knee dancing the night before. There's a third string transfer quarterback from, I think, St. Francis playing ball, Jason Brown. He's making plays, throwing dimes all over the field. Coverage busts are happening. There's just wide receivers running up, and South Carolina starts trolling Florida. And it's a big win for Shane Beamer because they're probably going to get to 6 now because I think they have Missouri this week. And I wouldn't put it past them to beat Clemson at this point because that game's in Columbia.
Yeah, this was just a total head scratcher, like you said. I mean, from what we've seen from South Carolina in conference play, they have been so overmatched. It's been ugly. Obviously, they beat Vanderbilt on a last-second drive by 1 point. So they are not a good football team. And what we saw from Florida is unimaginable, from what we thought Florida was. Obviously, that team has just given up on Dan Mullen. I don't know what the future holds for him. He's obviously been in the news a lot for comments he's made. And, I saw he said something too about the flu going around. But I mean, that might be a legitimate excuse if you lose a one-score game or like a fluke game. They kick a last-second field goal, but they got their butts whipped, like you said, up and down the field. They had coverage busts all over the place on defense. Somehow South Carolina, who's been quite possibly the worst rushing attack in the SEC, runs all over them for, I don't know, close to 300 yards, I think. Kevin Harris, who's been nowhere to be found all season, breaks out for over 100. It just seemed like everything went right for South Carolina. Clearly, they were playing this game like it was their Super Bowl. And whatever's going on in Gainesville is not good because that team has quit on Dan Mullen. And I don't know how he gets it turned around after that.
Yeah, the early rumor out of there that I think I saw on Twitter before the show is that there's some, let's see, attention being placed by boosters on Jeff Brom because he reminds them a little bit of Spurrier. Purdue has beaten a couple of top 5 teams this year. So that could be the weird finagle thing that nobody expects for that Florida job because whoever takes that Florida job, it usually isn't who you're projecting. When Dan Mullen got the job, everybody thought Chip Kelly was going to get it. And I bet they wish they could get Chip Kelly now.
Yeah. That would be that is quite the rumor. Yeah, Purdue's having a decent year. I don't know if the Florida faithful would be too pumped up for Purdue's coach, but I think at this point they would prefer anyone other than Dan Mullen. So who knows?
Yeah, and that also kind of poisons that Urban Meyer national championship system. So they're probably going to, like college football fans and boosters specifically, are always trying to recreate something. So you always go back. You never go forward and what to do. It's always about going back. And since the Dan Mullen system is going to put a little bit of a tarnish on the Urban Meyer, the success before that is Spurrier. So they want somebody that's going to throw it around the yard. And Jeff Brom will absolutely do that.
Very true.
Yeah. So let's move on to this week. We'll start off. Samford plays Florida. Alabama plays New Mexico State. Those games are going to go like you expect them to go. And if we're still talking about Florida and Samford come Sunday, you know there's been a problem. But we will not really talk about them. Those will be on SEC Network. The Alabama game will be on SEC Network at 11. And the Florida game is on ESPN Plus. But number 17, well, it was number 17. I guess the playoff rankings are due out now. So that's going to change. Against number 13, Auburn, that's going to change as well. It's probably Auburn at about 18 and Mississippi State unranked if you asked me at this point. But Auburn's favored by 5.5 points. It's on ESPN. It's the 11 o'clock game directly out of game day. And that is hilarious for so many reasons.
Yeah, that's great, and it should be a good game. Like you said, Mississippi State certainly should fall out of the rankings after the loss. However, lost a close game on the road, so I don't necessarily think anything less of Mississippi State coming off of that one. I'm leaning towards Auburn in this game. I just think they're a much more complete team in my opinion, and again they're playing at home where they played far better, but I'm interested to see. The Auburn defense obviously had a great game last week against A&M, and Mississippi State is just a totally different challenge. The way that they play offense is night and day compared to A&M, so interested to see how they attack the air raid and what Will Rogers can do on that defense, but I do think Auburn will be able to pull this one out. I think Bo Nix should be much more comfortable in this game. I don't think the Mississippi State D-line, although they've been good in run support, and they're certainly not a bad unit, I don't think they will quite be in Bo Nix's face as often as A&M was this past weekend. So I'll lean Auburn here, but I do think it'll be a close game.
Yeah, and I believe Derek Mason crossed paths with Mike Leach when he was at Washington State. So there is a built-in plan on how to deal with the air raid with Derek Mason, who, remember, Derek Mason made his bones in the Pac-12 as the team that could figure out Oregon when nobody else could. So that's the reason he got a head coaching job, and that's the reason he's defensive coordinator for Auburn and doing a pretty heck of a good job at the moment. Number 1, Georgia is at Tennessee. CBS 2:30 game. It's a game where Tennessee has all of the ingredients needed to upset Georgia. I'm not calling Georgia to lose that game. I'm not calling Georgia to not cover that game. But if something weird happened this weekend, and this was the game that happened, it should not be that much of a surprise. If Tennessee has a 5% chance to win, it's actually probably closer to 15% or 20%. Still not good. It's a lot better than it would be.
Yeah, I think if you're a Vols fan, you should be excited about this game. I expect Neyland to be rocking, similar, to how it was for Ole Miss. Hopefully, without the mustard bottles and golf balls, but
Exactly.
the crowd noise and the fans, I think, will be into it. I'm with you. I would not expect Georgia to lose this game. I don't think Tennessee's defense is very good, and I don't think they'll really be able to stop Georgia. I think Georgia can run the ball on them. I also think Georgia can pass the ball and hit them up with some explosive plays. I'm just really interested to see the Georgia defense go up against Hendon Hooker in this Tennessee offense, because Georgia's defense has been historic. I don't want to take anything away from them. However, they really haven't played what you would consider a potent offense to this point. So just interested to see what they do against a very high octane offense, one that's going to throw the ball around while also, running the ball quite effectively. I don't think they'll be able to run the ball on Georgia, but I'm interested to see what that Georgia secondary is made of, because I just don't think they've really been tested. So I think this will be relatively close. I think Tennessee, man, I'm going to say Tennessee can get to 21 points, which obviously no one has against Georgia.
Yeah, against Georgia, that's a big story.
Right. But I think this is a 42-21, 35-21 type of game where Georgia's in control and kind of doing what they want, but Tennessee is able to get a couple drives, a couple plays, just because it's such a different offense than what Georgia's seen and so much faster. So definitely be interested to watch, but would not put the dogs on upset alert.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we will turn our attention to the Battle of Columbia. This one's in Missouri. And Columbia, Missouri. Missouri is a 1-point favorite. It's on the SEC network at the Friends and Family time of 3 o'clock. So while you're watching Georgia and Tennessee, this will be happening as well. I'm expecting a letdown from South Carolina. If Missouri can get them, they have a chance to get to 6. If they lose this game, they do not. South Carolina is going to have another chance to get to 6 for the rest of the season. So it looks like it's going to be interesting. I'm worried about the Mizzou run game. It's the worst run defense I've ever seen. I just don't know. I don't know.
I really don't know either. Like you said, Mizzou, their defense is just terrible. Offensively, we know they've got a little bit of juice with Beatty and Bazelak. I don't know if Bazelak will be healthy. Obviously, he didn't play last week against Georgia. So we'll see. I thought the quarterbacks that they did trot out there looked okay. Really hard to tell, given they were going up against Georgia and just didn't have any room to operate. But I do think, even if it is a backup, I think this game will be competitive. South Carolina, even though they just blew out Florida, I don't think is really built to blow teams out. But I'm going to lean South Carolina here, mainly because I think Jason Brown has given them a little bit of a juice. He came in in garbage time against A&M when the backups were in, but was able to move the ball and score a couple touchdowns there late. Obviously, he played pretty well against Florida, and just sort of they just got a little something going for him on offense. And I think, given how bad Missouri's defense is, they'll be able to keep that going. It's just hard to say, though. I don't really trust them to go on the road. I guess I'll lean South Carolina, but I don't have a good feel for this game. And these teams they're not very good. I don't think I'll be tuning into this one very much.
Speaking of games you're not going to tune into, on ESPN2 at 6 o'clock, Kentucky, losers of 3 straight, at Vanderbilt. They're favored by 21. This is going to be a blowout. Kentucky is going to take care of business and come out of this 7-3. Vandy's going to look inept. They're going to get boat raced against Kentucky. They're going to get boat raced against Ole Miss. They're going to get boat raced against Tennessee. And then they're just going to call it an off season, I think.
Totally agree. Kentucky, this is a get right game. Got off to a hot start, got into the meat of the SEC schedule, got pushed around a little bit, and here they come out on the other side and see Vanderbilt, and they just have to be licking their chops. They'll be able to run on them. Hopefully, their defense steps it up a little bit. Thankfully, Vanderbilt's offensive attack is nothing like Tennessee, so they should be fine. I definitely think Kentucky will win and win big and cover that 21 points.
Do you think a team like Vanderbilt or Missouri or something like that, they'll see what's going on with the Baylor guys and maybe make a run at like Philip Montgomery or somebody like that with the Baylor part because they see the way the defenses are having trouble with it? Somebody like Vandy or Missouri or lower end, because that's a Baylor guy that they could get.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. We'll see though. Those both of those programs are just they're in a tough spot in the arms race of the SEC, and I don't know how attractive those schools are. We'll see though. I think it's definitely something they should think about. I mean, Baylor is not historically an attractive spot either, but
Yeah.
they've had some success and made good hires post Art Briles. So certainly something to think about. But I really, hard to say.
Well, speaking of which, that Joey McGuire, that's your neck of the woods at Texas Tech just made a hire. Tell me what about him.
Yeah, I mean, this was totally off my radar. Obviously, when
Mm-hmm.
that job came open, the speculation was two guys. One, Sonny Dykes at SMU, who's done a good job there. His father, Spike, coached at Texas Tech for a long time. So there was a clear connection there. People thought that they would try to lure him away from SMU. And then the other one was the UTSA coach, Jeff Traylor, who's obviously having a good year in San Antonio. UTSA just signed him to like a 10-year deal with a big buyout. So I guess he was off the table. I have no idea what happened with Dykes. He might not have really wanted that job. He's got a pretty good thing going at SMU. And yeah, the guy that they pulled from Baylor is they're basically taking the Art Briles model without hiring Art Briles, because obviously Briles was a longtime Texas high school coach, ended up getting the job at Houston, moving on to Baylor, having a lot of success. This guy is a longtime high school coach as well, out of the DFW area, won a couple state championships, ended up getting hired with Matt Rule is actually the one who hired him at Baylor. So he started, and I think he's an associate head coach, and he's like a linebackers coach or something.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But yeah, so he was on Matt Rule's staff there, was retained by Aranda, and basically they are going with the culture fit. So Texas guy who's got roots in the state, has a lot of good relationships with coaches, and they're hoping he can parlay that into recruiting success, which is really where Tech has struggled, just because it's so hard to get kids to go out to Lubbock.
To New
So
Mexico? Yeah.
yeah, so that's what they're hoping. It's one of those things. It could be a total disaster, or again, it might end up working out pretty well. Again, he'll be a great fit there. I think he'll rally the fan base, but that only lasts so long once you start playing games and you're expected to win. So
Yeah, and it's
we'll
important
see.
to know. It's important to know that he's coming into a Big 12 that is completely different than what it is right now. So basically, that job, that Texas Tech job, turns into the Art Briles version of Houston because he's essentially going to the American without the
Yeah,
heavyweights in that league.
yeah, exactly. Who knows what the future of that league is, and most likely will not be considered a Power Five league. So we'll
No,
see.
I think they will, and I think the American will as well.
You think so?
I think the Power Six is going to happen whenever they actually break away because I think the Constitution got amended to allow for that to happen, and I think everybody that wants to is going to move to this new FBS Autonomy 5 or whatever thing. But I don't think the Big 12 is going to be left out.
That's totally fair. Yeah, I think you're right. When they break away, they would not get left out. I'm worried just for the next. It all depends on when this happens, but whenever Texas and OU do leave, just in terms of our current state of affairs before there is a mass exodus, I'm interested to see what pollsters, the committee, etc., looks at the Big 12 like. Um, so we'll see.
Yeah, I think we saw last Tuesday what they look at them like when they put Oklahoma at like ninth.
Very
Something
true.
crazy. Yeah, it's the only 9-0 team in the country. Just wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
I know.
Auburn, Arkansas, and LSU, the battle for the boot in Baton Rouge. Arkansas, a 2.5 point favorite. It's on the SEC network. It is a night game. Should be excitement. There's been excitement that's in this rivalry. It's a game that I think Arkansas has a chance to win by 2 or 3 touchdowns because I do think LSU kind of spent everything they had last week.
Totally agree. I think Arkansas got a much needed win a week ago against Mississippi State. They're going to be feeling themselves now. And this is a game that they should win. They're the better team right now. They probably have better personnel, which is not something I thought I would say about Arkansas going up against LSU, but we know how depleted LSU is right now. And again, I thought LSU, as good as they played against Alabama and as good of a plan as they had, they put a lot on film that they hadn't shown all year. So I don't think there's going to be a whole lot left in the tank that they can pull out of nowhere to confuse Arkansas. So, I think Kendall Browse will be ready. They'll have, Sam Pittman obviously coaches up that offensive line extremely well. They'll have a plan in place for any of those exotic fronts that Durante Jones is going to try to throw at them. And, their offense is just very different than Alabama's, the way that they run the ball, run with the quarterback. So it presents a different challenge than what Alabama does. So I like Arkansas in this game. And, especially defensively, the way Arkansas plays, they're very sound. And without a big game breaker on LSU, they should be able to kind of keep everything in front of them, keep it under control. Again, just do the bend, don't break thing that we've seen them do for a long time and get out of there with a win.
Yeah, and props to Sam Pittman. This is a team, Arkansas, if they win this game, they have a legit chance to go 8-4 this season. And if you look at Arkansas in 2019 under Chad Morris, you wouldn't believe that that was possible at all. So hell of a job by Sam Pittman at Arkansas because 8-4 is on the table, 7-5 is on the table because they got Missouri as the finale, LSU now, and in between they got Alabama. That is what it is. But we move on to our game of the week because, as you guys know, the Hammer also does something called the Junction Blog, and he's an A&M guy. You can see the Ole Miss stuff behind me. So Texas A&M and Ole Miss, this is going to be a pretty big deal. And we're going to do a live stream or try to do a live stream later on this week. We'll get to you if we can be able to fit it in our schedule and do what we need to do. Just to talk about the game for about 30 minutes to an hour and have a little bit of fun doing it. But game days in town, excitement all over the place. The place is going to be sold out to the rafters. It's going to be a fun day, and I'm looking to see how it unfolds.
Yeah, it's going to be a great day. Anytime game day is going to your game or your campus, it's just a great atmosphere. It sort of elevates everything. I don't necessarily watch a ton of game day anymore like I did several years ago, but it still brings that just sort of marquee matchup and atmosphere to the game and to campus. So it should be really exciting. I think it's going to be a tough game. Obviously, A&M just had a hard-fought battle against Auburn. Ole Miss had a bit of an easier matchup with Liberty. And then going on the road, I'm sure the vault is going to be packed and loud. So I'm excited for it. Obviously, I'm not going to pick against A&M. So that's where I'm leaning in this game. My reasoning behind it, I think the A&M run game is coming into its own. They were able to run the ball against Auburn, albeit they needed some chunk plays. It was not like they were picking up 5 and 6 yards a pop. It was much more 2, 3, 1 yard run, then mix in a 15 or 20 yarder from Isaiah Spiller. But I think they're going to be able to run the ball on Ole Miss. And then word on the street is Calzada's fine after dislocating his shoulder and popping it back in that game. So thankfully he'll be in there. The thing that worries me the most, obviously, is the Ole Miss offense and Matt Corral. Now, I don't know. You'll have to help me here on the receivers. Who all is going to be healthy in this one? Because again, I think we've seen that has been a pretty big impact on Ole Miss since those guys have gone down. And obviously Corral himself going through some injuries, and he hasn't been able to run the ball as well as he would like. So again, I think the way the A&M defense is playing, they should be able to contain Ole Miss to a certain extent, especially if Corral is limited running the ball and if any of those receivers on the edge are out. Because I do think that is where their best chance to beat A&M is on the outside. Obviously, Corral's run game, if he's healthy, adds a different element, but I trust where this A&M run defense is right now. So we know how accurate Corral is throwing the ball down the field. If he's got the guys that can win in one-on-one coverage, or there's any coverage bust, they'll take advantage. So that's kind of where I'm at. I don't know. What are your thoughts on this one?
Well, first of all, I think the key to the game, well, absolutely key to the game, is getting Texas A&M to third down. If A&M can run the ball and it's 2nd and 6 and 3rd and 2 and 1st and 10 and 2nd and 6, and you get into that pattern, you're in trouble. But if you can get a 3rd and long in the game, a lot of people don't realize that Ole Miss leads the nation in sacks. Mm-hmm. They don't even think about that. Sam Williams is leading the country in sacks with 10.5. He has a half a sack more than I think Will Anderson at this point. And they can exotic you a little bit with the blitz game. And you've seen it. It's kind of what Arkansas does, the same type stuff.
Right.
So I think that is the key to the game. I think that Ole Miss's offense is going to attack A&M because A&M has the best set of defensive linemen Ole Miss will see this year. They don't play Georgia, and A&M is second only to Georgia. So I think Ole Miss is going to run a ton of jet sweeps. You're going to see a lot of outside runs, and you're going to see lightning fast tempo to the level of which I don't think people have seen from Ole Miss. And that is just to get that defensive line a little bit tired, and you can protect your quarterback a little bit better. You can pop some inside zone runs, but it's all going to be based off of getting that defensive line tired.
Yeah, I can definitely see that, and that's probably the best plan of attack to sort of adjust to what that defensive line can do, because we saw just this past weekend with what Auburn was trying to do, they didn't really do much of that. It was much more of just a normal Auburn offensive game plan, and you saw pretty quickly once Tank wasn't able to really get much, that they were going to be in trouble. They had a little bit of success throwing the ball to the tight end, but next to nothing throwing to the receivers. And again, Bo Nix was under pressure in 3rd and long a lot because they were backed up. So those defensive ends and those defensive linemen were just able to pin their ears back, knowing here comes a pass. So as long as we stay in our lanes, keep this guy in the pocket, we can get to him. So yeah, the jet sweep stuff is probably a good plan, and definitely the tempo, because that's something A&M has not really seen much of at all this year. They haven't really played a team that goes fast like that. So I could see that giving them some trouble. I honestly think, and I'm trying to think of a score here. I'm thinking it's going to be similar to a lot of Ole Miss's recent games, where you're in like the high 20s, low 30s. I don't see A&M. Again, somehow they did it against Bama. They had the help of a special teams touchdown, obviously, but I don't see A&M scoring, into the 40s in this one. So they're going to have to hold Ole Miss probably into the 20s. And hope that they can outlast them or get up there. But I think this will be, a 31-28, 31-27 type of game. But I'm excited. I mean, it should be a really, really fun game.
Yeah, and we've reached the point of the season also where a lot of the stuff coming from Lane Kiffin is just gamesmanship at this point. Matt Corral looked fine against Liberty, although he didn't take any hits. He slid like 5 yards before contact, but that may have been by design to put that on film. And Braylon Sanders played in that game and caught a deep ball. So I imagine he's going to be fine at wide receiver. If Dontario Drummond comes back, he's 2 weeks from getting hurt against Auburn. So if he's back good to go, Ole Miss will then be fairly close to full strength. Although those guys are not going to be 100%, but they'll probably better than what they were. John Rice Plumlee and Dennis Jackson for Ole Miss went over 100 yards last week against Liberty. So I think John Rice in the jet sweep game is going to be a weapon, and last week was a nice surprise.
Yeah, it was. I thought coming into the year he was going to be utilized quite a bit more. I've been surprised just that he hasn't been more of a part of their offense. And look, as an A&M fan, the game in 2019, still have nightmares about it. We won barely, but John Rice Plumlee ran all over A&M and a team, that was, I guess that was obviously Matt Luke's last year. So Ole Miss, there wasn't a whole lot of good things going on in 2019, but John Rice Plumlee, when he's got the ball in his hands, is scary. So I don't want him to touch the ball very, very often as an A&M fan, certainly.
Yeah, and the funny thing about this Texas A&M Ole Miss game, we don't know how Texas A&M is going to react to Lane Kiffin because that game got canceled last year. We haven't seen a Mike Elko and how he would defend against Lane Kiffin and Jeff Lebby and the guys. So there's a lot of unknowns that you just don't genuinely have with division opponents 2 years in.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's just an interesting matchup of styles. That game last weekend, in a lot of ways, is kind of the game that Jimbo likes. He likes to run the ball, and he's never going to be a hurry up, throw the ball all over the yard. He'll take some shots, but he's very calculated about it. And obviously Lane Kiffin is the opposite in some ways, where he likes to throw the ball deep and take shots, but he also preaches physicality in the run game. He just goes about it in a different way. So a lot of it, like I said, with that tempo that Ole Miss can run, it just sort of depends on who's able to impose their will. Is Ole Miss able to run tempo and move the ball and speed A&M up and get them off their game, or is A&M able to run the ball, like you said, on first and second down, get into third and short, sort of bleed the clock, slow things down, and play the style that they want to play? And it, again, a lot of it just comes down to that. Who can be comfortable and impose their will and do what they want to do and control the game in that way. It'll be fascinating to see the coaches match up against each other that we haven't seen before.
Yeah. Also, how many times have y'all played out of Texas this year? It seems like every time I see Texas A&M, it's in College Station or that one game in Arlington.
Yeah, so we've only played outside of Texas, I guess, twice at this point. We went obviously to Missouri a couple weeks ago, which is not at all a tough environment, and then early in the year played Colorado, and even that game wasn't on campus. They moved that to Mile High, where the Broncos play. So this will be a test for sure, because we played a lot of home games and neutral site games to this point, and Missouri's crowd and stadium atmosphere for an 11 a.m. game reminded me of like a high school game. So this will be a lot different. It'll be at night. It'll be it'll be packed.
So this will be Calzada's first real hostile environment he's gone into.
Yes, it will.
Okay. All right. Well, I thank you, Hank. This has been the Biscuits and SEC Week 11 preview. Again, tune in. Well, actually, this airs Friday, and the live stream would have already happened. So, hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was really good. Yep. But for Hank, I'm Steve. Thanks for watching, and everybody have good luck this weekend. Be safe, have fun, and hope your team does as well as can be expected. Take care, Hank.
Thanks, Stephen. Appreciate it.